Ethan Walker never intended to become anyone's hero. He was just trying to make ends meet, pushing through another long shift in a cramped temp office, wishing he could give his daughter a better life. He had no idea that, across the street, perched on a narrow ledge of a towering apartment building, a tiny figure was teetering on the edge of a life-altering moment. One misstep would change everything, for him, for that child, and for a powerful family whose fortunes spanned an entire city. But how could a struggling father with barely enough money to keep his own household afloat transform the fate of someone he'd never met? Before we carry on, let me know where you are watching from in the comments and hit the subscribe button for something special tomorrow. Ethan Walker was a man who believed in perseverance, not because he thought it would bring him fortune, but because he had no other choice. As a single father to 8-year-old Lily, he navigated the uneasy balance between providing for her material needs and giving her the emotional security she deserved. He had been many things: a short-order cook, a warehouse worker, a night janitor, and currently, a temp assistant in downtown offices that barely noticed him. Every morning, he left Lily at a friend's place near her school, forced a brave smile for her benefit, and hurried off on foot to whatever building he was assigned to that week. Though he yearned for stability, all he ever seemed to have was part-time gigs and daydreams. Still, he held on to one certainty: he had to keep going. Lily's wide, expressive eyes and confident grin made every hardship worthwhile. If he packed sandwiches for them both and parted ways in the morning with a quick promise to check her homework at night, that was enough to keep him moving. Even if it meant skipping meals to cover rent or living in a cramped apartment a full hour's bus ride away from the city center, he accepted those sacrifices as normal. Some days he even managed to find small joys, like when Lily discovered a new passion in school reading about birds and sketching them in a worn notebook. Life was far from perfect, but in Ethan's eyes, Lily's well-being made every struggle worth enduring. The morning of the incident, he hurried through the crowded downtown sidewalks, weaving around tourists snapping photos of the skyline. A swirl of noise surrounded him: honking cabs, rumbling buses, and pedestrians talking into their phones or sipping coffee as they rushed to work. It was just another gray morning in a city that paid little attention to struggling souls like Ethan. His mind was occupied with a host of nagging worries. The electric bill needed paying, Lily's shoes were getting too tight, and the bus pass he relied on was about to expire. Time and money felt like a dual avalanche, coming at him from all sides. As he reached the lobby of a lofty office tower, he glanced at the clock on his phone. He was running 10 minutes late. Again, the security desk gave him a disapproving look, but he offered a polite nod and hurried past, quickly entering a mirrored elevator that smelled faintly of cleaning products. He rode it up to the 16th floor, where a cramped temp office was located. Today's assignment was straightforward data entry, but every keystroke felt weighty. Each hour spent in that bland, fluorescent-lit space was a reminder of the bigger life he wanted for Lily, a reminder that he was nowhere close to giving her the comforts other kids took for granted. Yet, he couldn't afford to let these disheartening thoughts slow him. He typed as fast as he could, hoping to impress the supervisor in a last-ditch attempt for something more long-term. Around midday, he opted to forego lunch again. Usually, he'd bring a peanut butter sandwich or leftover noodles, but lately, even that felt like a luxury. So he stayed at his desk, tapping away on a battered keyboard, responding to instant messages from colleagues who barely acknowledged him in person. Shortly before 1 in the afternoon, the flicker of tired eyes made him glance out the window. The view took in a slice of the city: high-rise buildings of varying shapes and heights, bustling streets below, and across the way, an older apartment complex with a slightly decaying facade. Though it rose only 30 stories compared to the shinier towers nearby, it had a certain majesty shaped by decades of lives lived within its walls. He leaned back for a moment, taking a breath of stale office air. Something caught his eye: a small figure on a higher floor of the apartment building, across the street, perched precariously on the ledge of a balcony. At first, he thought it might be an adult trying to fix something outside, but then he noticed the size of the figure. It was far too small to be a grown-up. His heart stuttered. Was that a child? Surely a parent or guardian was nearby, ready to scoop the child back to safety. But seconds ticked by, and the small figure didn't move from the ledge. Fear took hold, and Ethan felt a tingle shoot through his body. He stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward with a clang. "Is something wrong?" asked a coworker seated a few desks away, but the question was flat and impersonal, like everything else in that place. Ethan pressed his palms against the glass, straining his eyes. Yes, it was definitely a toddler, maybe 3 or 4 years old, standing on the outside railing of the balcony. The child's legs wobbled in a way that made Ethan's entire body tense, as if bracing for impact. Confusion and dread overcame him. Why wasn't anyone inside the apartment reacting? This was a tragedy waiting to happen, playing out in slow motion. Without saying another word, Ethan sprinted for the elevator. People stared, but no one stopped him. He hammered the down button repeatedly, his heart pounding. The elevator seemed to take an eternity to arrive. When the doors finally slid open, he slid in and hit the ground floor button multiple times. Each second felt like a brutal countdown. A child was in danger, and he was the only one who had noticed so far. His stomach churned with fear, and his pulse beat so loudly he could hear it echo in the sealed elevator. The moment the doors opened on the lobby, he bolted out and pushed through the glass doors onto the sidewalk. He paused, scanning the scene across the street. Directly in front of him, traffic crawled by in typical midday congestion. The apartment building, though not the tallest, was still formidable, and he had to figure out which floor the child was on. He locked eyes on the approximate balconia cluster of potted plants could be seen. That was his landmark. Ducking around cars, he dashed across the road, ignoring angry horn blasts from drivers. He found himself in front of the apartment complex entrance, a worn bronze sign that read, "High Garden Apartments." He yanked the door handle, but it was locked and required a key or an electronic code. There was an intercom system, but no time to figure out the occupant's name or code. He peered through the glass door. A doorman station stood vacant. A sign indicated the doorman was on break. Ethan's heart sank. Every second counted, and the child was still out there, alone, risking a fatal fall. Spotting an older woman walking out, he dashed forward and caught the door before it closed. She nearly dropped her groceries in surprise. "Excuse me," Ethan gasped. "There's a toddler on a balcony upstairs, about to fall. I have to get up there." The woman's eyes widened, her face drained of color. "Oh dear," she said. But before she could say more, Ethan had already rushed inside. He saw multiple elevators against one wall and pressed the up button, but his leg bounced with impatience as he waited. The elevator was creeping down from the 25th floor, which could take forever. A flicker of panic made him glance to the right, where a sign pointed to the stairs. In his mind, a single phrase repeated, "Every second counts." He bolted for the stairwell door, throwing it open. The steps were concrete, the air stifling. He took them 2 at a time, breathing heavily as he climbed. 1 floor, 2 floors, 3 floors. Every muscle in his legs burned, but he pushed harder, remembering the desperate, wobbly stance of that toddler on a ledge far too high for any small child. He was not going to let this child slip away, not if he had any chance of preventing it. Somewhere around the 10th floor, he almost collided with another resident carrying a basket of laundry. "Sorry," Ethan huffed, sweat pouring down his temples, but he didn't slow. He bounded upward, ignoring the persistent ache in his calves. His surroundings blurred. All he could think about was the child's tiny form, arms outstretched in uncertain balance. A mistake, a gust of wind, or a random slip would lead to an unspeakable tragedy. "Faster," Ethan told himself. "Faster." When he reached the 19th floor, his lungs burned and his shirt clung to him with sweat. He guessed the balcony was around here or perhaps on the 20th floor. Without hesitation, he burst through the door into the hallway. It was dimly lit, with worn carpeting and battered walls that hinted at decades of use. He sprinted to the windows at the end of the corridor, trying to see across to the building he had come from, but his angle was off. Cursing under his breath, he realized the child was probably 1 floor higher. For a moment, he was tempted to run to each apartment, banging on doors, but time was too short. Instead, he dashed back into the stairwell and flew up another flight. Bursting onto the 20th floor, he took a quick look at the apartment numbers. The building was designed in a U shape, so he'd have to guess which side faced the street. He reasoned the apartments with even numbers might face downtown. He sprinted to the line of even-numbered doors, scanning for signs of a family. A row of potted plants near one door sparked his memory that was the same arrangement he had noticed from across the street. He slammed his fist against the door. "Hello," he shouted, voice cracking with adrenaline. "There's a child on your balcony. Open up." The silence made his stomach drop. He hammered on the door again, terrified of being too late. He dared to try the doorknob and, to his surprise, it turned. He stepped into a modestly furnished living room that smelled faintly of lavender and lemon polish. No one was there. The patio doors leading to the balcony stood slightly ajar. Through the curtains, he saw a small foot. Without pause, he rushed forward. The toddler was on the other side of the rail, gripping it with tiny fingers, staring at the city below with a mixture of curiosity and fear. The child's eyes flickered toward Ethan. A single step, a trembling miscalculation, and the child could slip. Ethan carefully opened the glass door, stepping out onto the balcony. His heart hammered so forcefully he thought it might leap out of his chest. He whispered, voice tight, Hey there, little one. It's okay. Let me help you. Let me bring you inside." The toddler looked at him without comprehension. They had rosy cheeks and hair that curled around their ears. Ethan realized it was a little girl, not much older than 3. She mumbled something incoherent, tears welling in her eyes. One foot began to slip off the narrow ledge. Time froze. Ethan lunged forward, reaching over the railing to grab her. In that instant, the child tipped backward, her small body beginning to freefall into open air. A piercing scream tore from her tiny throat, but Ethan's hand caught her wrist at the last possible second. He clutched her with a strength he didn't know he had, dragging her back over the ledge and into his arms. He stumbled backward, nearly colliding with a row of potted plants, but he kept a firm hold on her. She clung to him, trembling, letting out high-pitched sobs into his chest. Exhaling a trembling breath, Ethan rocked her gently. "Shh, you're safe. It's okay." He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, sweat stinging his eyes. Relief crashed over him, making his limbs shake. The toddler's sobs gradually subsided into whimpers. He carried her inside, away from the danger of that ledge. "Is anyone here?" he called, voice echoing through the apartment. No answer. Gently setting the girl on the couch, he hurried to close and lock the balcony door. Then he looked around. The apartment was elegant in some ways, with plush carpets, upscale furniture, and tasteful artwork, but there was no immediate sign of an adult. Kneeling in front of the child, Ethan tried to stay calm. She was still catching her breath, her cheeks flushed with tears. "Where's your mom or dad?" he asked softly. The girl's big eyes stared at him. "Mama, gone," she managed to say between hiccuping sobs. The single phrase sank like a stone in Ethan's stomach. This tiny child had been completely unattended in a tall apartment, left to wander onto a balcony. He felt anger bubble up, but mostly, he was just grateful she was still alive. He glanced at a cell phone on the coffee table. It was locked, but he hoped someone would come home soon. The fear and adrenaline were still surging, and he realized he needed to do something else, anything to ensure she was truly safe. He opened the fridge, finding a half-full bottle of juice. He poured some into a sippy cup that was sitting in the sink, rinsing it first. When he offered it to the girl, she accepted it with quiet gratitude, sipping slowly, her wide eyes never leaving him. After a moment, the front door burst open, and a frantic woman in her late 20s rushed in, nearly dropping her purse. She had glossy, dark hair, and her stylish suit suggested she was a professional. The wide-eyed panic on her face gave way to confusion when she saw Ethan crouched by the child. "Who are you? What are you doing in my father's apartment?" she demanded, stepping forward in alarm. Ethan rose, hands slightly raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm Ethan Walker. I work in the building across the street. I saw your child on the balcony railing, about to fall. The door was open, so I ran in to save her. I'm sorry, but I couldn't just do nothing." His voice trembled, the stress of the whole ordeal still coursing through him. The woman's face turned pale, then flooded with relief. then fresh panic. She rushed over and scooped her daughter into her arms, hugging her tightly, tears running down her cheeks. My sweet Olivia. I had to step out for a moment. I thought she was napping. I locked the door, or I thought I did. I never imagined. She broke off, pressing her lips against her daughter's hair. Thank you, she managed, glancing at Ethan with tearful gratitude. You saved her. I can't even thank you. Oh my goodness. She kissed Olivia's forehead repeatedly, tears mingling with frantic words of comfort. Ethan offered a shy nod, stepping away so she could comfort her daughter. The child clung to her mother, but kept looking at Ethan as if searching for reassurance. A swirl of questions and accusations glimmered in the woman's eyes, but the overriding emotion was clearly gratitude. I'm Danielle, she said, voice trembling. I'm so sorry. To know how dangerous this could have been. Is she all right? Did she breathe okay? Was she... Oh, I can't believe this happened. She's fine, Ethan assured her, stepping back even further. Just shaken. She nearly fell, but I was able to grab her. Even as he said it, the horror of the scenario replayed in his mind. That small body tipping into the open air, the abrupt catch, the heart-stopping moment of pulling her to safety. It left him feeling shaky and a little nauseous. Danielle stood balancing Olivia on her hip. I had a quick errand and never imagined she'd wake up. I really did lock the door, maybe it was faulty. I'm so sorry you had to... This is all just terrifying. She looked around the apartment as if seeing it for the first time. The comforting illusions of safety had dissolved. She moved toward the balcony door and secured it, verifying the lock with trembling hands. Then she turned to Ethan. I have to call my father. He owns this place, though I'm staying here temporarily. Please, wait just a second. I need to tell him what happened. She fumbled for her phone in her purse and quickly tapped a contact. Pacing the living room, she recounted the incident in short bursts of shock and relief. Ethan caught phrases like, he saved Olivia, and, yes, Dad, it was that close. While she talked, Ethan gently eased onto the edge of an armchair, the events finally catching up to him. His lungs burned from his sprint up the stairs, and his limbs felt rubbery. He was about to say he should probably leave, that it was enough to see Olivia safe, but Danielle seemed intent on him staying. After a few minutes, she ended her call, her eyes still wet with tears, but there was a new note of composure in her voice. My father wants to meet you. Do you mind waiting a little while? He's on his way. It's not something he takes lightly. Ethan forced a polite smile. Sure, of course, he said, though he felt awkward about the idea. I'm just relieved I got here in time. She's okay, and that's what's important. He glanced at Olivia, who was resting her head on her mother's shoulder, eyes half-lidded in weariness after the trauma. The child's face still had tear streaks, but there was a sense of calm returning. Ethan felt a protective pang in his chest. Had he been even 30 seconds slower, the story might have ended in unimaginable tragedy. In the flurry of those moments, he forgot he was supposed to be clocked in at his temp job. Only the jingle of his phone in his pocket reminded him. He fished it out to see a missed call and a notification from his manager, politely reminding him he was needed back after lunch. With a sigh, he set it to silent. His legs still felt like rubber, and he didn't want to be rude by leaving before Danielle's father arrived. That was the last thing on his mind right now, though part of him braced for scolding from his manager or losing the assignment. Minutes slipped by in a haze of tense relief. Danielle paced the living room, occasionally rubbing her daughter's back. She asked Ethan if he wanted water, which he gratefully accepted. She pressed a bottle into his hands, and he downed half of it in one gulp, feeling the dryness in his throat subside. While they waited, Danielle apologized multiple times, her voice hushed with reverence for what had nearly happened. When I stepped out, I locked the door to the apartment, but I forgot to lock the balcony door. I feel so guilty. I can't believe I was so careless. Thank you again. Truly, thank you. She dabbed at her eyes with the corner of her sleeve. Ethan shook his head, wanting to reassure her. Accidents happen, and I'm glad I was there to help. He offered a gentle smile, though inwardly he was still grappling with the vivid memory. He had witnessed near disaster, and that kind of moment leaves a mark a tremor in the mind, reminding you how fragile life is. About 15 minutes later, the front door swung open, and a distinguished older man strode in. He wore a tailored suit, gray hair swept back, and an air of authority that seemed to fill the room instantly. A pair of sharp eyes darted to Ethan, then to Danielle and Olivia, taking in every detail. The man's posture was tall and upright, projecting confidence. In a smooth, commanding voice, he asked, "Is everyone all right? Danielle? Olivia? Are you?" He stopped, relief flooding his features when he saw his granddaughter safe in Danielle's arms. "Thank goodness," he breathed, stepping forward to place a protective hand on Olivia's head. Then his gaze locked onto Ethan. "You must be the man who saved my granddaughter." His voice held a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "I'm Charles Whitmore. Thank you. Seems insufficient for what you've done." He extended his hand, and Ethan shook it, feeling the slightest tremor in the older man's grip. Despite the controlled demeanor, Charles was clearly rattled by the near loss of his granddaughter. "I came as soon as I heard. My driver is waiting downstairs, but I wanted to see you in person." Ethan felt suddenly self-conscious of his sweaty shirt and the fact that he was just a random guy who had raced off from work. Still, he maintained eye contact. "I'm Ethan Walker," he said simply. "I didn't think, I just saw her and ran over. I'm happy she's safe." Charles's expression grew solemn. "You have my eternal gratitude. Danielle told me Olivia was seconds from falling." He turned to Danielle, who nodded, hugging her daughter tighter. Then Charles faced Ethan once more. "I owe you a debt that can't be repaid. You've done something extraordinary today, risking your own safety, and I'd like to discuss how I might express my thanks." Ethan shook his head, a blush creeping up his neck. "Really, sir, I'm just relieved she's okay. I don't need anything." He wiped the back of his hand across his brow, still breathing a bit heavily. A glimmer of determination lit Charles's eyes. "Don't be so quick to refuse," he said gently. "You saved my granddaughter. Whatever your circumstances, I can see you're a responsible man who doesn't hesitate to act in a crisis. That's a rare trait." He seemed to note the worn shoes and the faint lines of stress around Ethan's eyes. "Let me do something to show you my appreciation." Danielle, stepping closer, put a hand lightly on her father's arm and then turned to Ethan. "My father is a generous man, and he also recognizes integrity when he sees it. Please, don't dismiss his offer. Allow him to do something good in return for what you've done today." Ethan swallowed, uncertain. The last thing he expected was to be singled out by a man like Charles Whitmore, who very clearly had influence and wealth. Even if the older man was sincere, it was dizzying to think about. Part of Ethan wanted to politely decline and leave. He had a job to get back to, fleeting though it was. He felt out of place in this elegant living space with these refined people, their tidy clothes a stark contrast to his sweat-soaked budget attire. But refusing might be offensive, and there was no denying that he could use help. Bills piled up, Lily needed stable schooling, and every month felt like a precarious balancing act. Maybe this was a chance, a door opening. Should he set aside his pride for the possibility of a better life for his daughter? Eventually, he nodded, voice quiet. "Okay," he said. "If you really want to, I'll accept your kindness, but please know I was just doing what anyone would do in my position." Charles offered a small, respectful bow of his head. Not everyone would dash up 20 flights of stairs for a stranger, but let's not dwell on that now. First things first, I want to make sure Olivia sees a doctor just to confirm she's truly fine. Then, I'd like to have a conversation with you about how I can help you in your own life. Is that agreeable? Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling a swirl of apprehension and something else hope, maybe. "Yes, sir. That's fine. I appreciate it." Even as he spoke, he could hardly believe his own words. A powerful real estate mogul was offering to help him. Just an hour ago, he had been an anonymous temp worker, scrounging for bus fare. Now, he was being asked to remain in the presence of a man who likely owned entire blocks of the city. The speed of events left Ethan's mind reeling. Charles gestured toward the door. "I'll have my driver take us all to the hospital, just to be thorough. After that, we can talk." Do you have any obligations, or is there someone you need to notify? Ethan's phone vibrated again. He realized he had to at least let his boss know something. I'm currently working a temp job downtown, so I should call to let them know I'm going to be away for a bit, he said, feeling the inevitability that he was probably going to lose that gig. Even so, it paled in comparison to what had just happened. Charles's lips thinned, though not with anger. Right. Attend to that. But please, come with us. Let's see to Olivia's well-being immediately. He turned to Danielle, who nodded gratefully. She still held Olivia, who seemed tired but otherwise all right. Charles led the way out, and Ethan followed, making a quick phone call. The conversation with his temp supervisor was brief and stilted. He tried to explain that he had saved a child's life, but the supervisor seemed less than sympathetic, simply stating that if Ethan was not back within the hour, they'd have to assign someone else. Sighing, Ethan accepted his fate. In the polished, marble-floored lobby, Charles's driver greeted them. He was a tall man with a stoic face, wearing a tailored black suit. He opened the rear door of a sleek black SUV for Danielle and Olivia, then ushered Ethan and Charles into the second row of seats. Inside, the plush leather felt like another world compared to the battered bus seats Ethan was used to. As the driver navigated the busy downtown streets, Charles made a quick phone call to a private clinic, arranging to have a pediatrician on hand. The entire conversation was short, direct, and revealing of Charles's considerable influence. In less than 10 minutes, they arrived at a modern medical building that exuded wealth and efficiency. A nurse greeted them at the entrance, leading them through a set of gleaming corridors to a private examination room. Olivia clung to her mother, sensing the unfamiliar environment. The pediatrician, a calm older woman with gentle eyes, examined Olivia thoroughly. She confirmed that the child had no injuries, apart from minor bruises where Ethan had gripped her in the rescue. She'll be just fine, the doctor said, smiling kindly. A good night's sleep and some extra love, and this will be just a memory. Danielle breathed a sigh of relief, hugging Olivia close. Thank you. I was so worried, she murmured, pressing her cheek against her daughter's hair. Olivia stared at the various instruments in the doctor's office, her small brow furrowed in confusion. Charles's shoulders relaxed for the first time since he'd arrived. He thanked the pediatrician sincerely, then turned to Ethan. Now, I'd like to show my appreciation. If you could spare some time, there's a restaurant a few blocks away. We can sit and talk. This is not a minor debt, and I don't intend to treat it as such. Ethan glanced at Danielle, who nodded encouragingly. He looked at Olivia, who was rubbing her eyes sleepily but seemed to have recovered from the worst of her fright. He also thought of Lily, waiting for him at their friend's place after school. She was accustomed to him being a bit late, but he'd have to make sure to pick her up soon. Still, this was an opportunity he felt he shouldn't pass up. All right, Ethan said, still uncertain but feeling compelled by the gravity of the moment. Lead the way. Charles signaled to his driver that they'd be heading to a nearby restaurant. Danielle insisted on joining them, if only to keep Olivia close, though she planned to let Olivia nap in her arms once they got settled. Outside, the SUV glided through the city, and Ethan stared out the tinted windows at a world that suddenly felt new. A swirl of thoughts assaulted him. He'd never had connections to wealthy people, never even known a single person who could call a private clinic and be seen right away, or step into a 5-star restaurant without a reservation. This was a glimpse into a realm so far from his everyday existence that he felt like a tourist on foreign soil. Upon arriving, the hostess recognized Charles and ushered them into a secluded corner booth. The ambiance was subdued, with soft lighting and plush seating. A waiter appeared instantly, offering menus filled with gourmet options. Ethan glanced at the prices, swallowing hard at how a single meal here probably equaled a week's worth of groceries for him and Lily. He set the menu down quickly, not wanting to appear overwhelmed, though the tension in his posture was evident. Charles gave Ethan a gentle look. Order whatever you like, he encouraged, and don't worry about the cost. Tonight, I'll be covering every expense. Ethan nodded, but his mind kept tripping on the surreal nature of this day. Across from him, Danielle cradled Olivia, who drifted in and out of light dozing. Every so often, the child peeked at Ethan, as if reassured by the presence of the man who had saved her. After the server took their orders, Charles cleared his throat. I'd like to learn more about you, Ethan. Danielle tells me you came from the building across the street, that you're a temp worker. Is that right? Yes, sir, Ethan confirmed. I do short-term assignments around the city, mostly data entry or clerical stuff. I've also worked in warehouses, restaurants, wherever I can find a spot. It's been a struggle, but it's honest work. Charles nodded, steepling his fingers. I see. And do you live alone? I have a daughter, Lily. 8 years old, Ethan said quietly, with a gentle pride shining in his eyes. We live in an apartment about an hour from here by bus. It's small, but we manage. And her mother? Danielle asked softly, compassion evident in her gaze. Ethan hesitated, pressing his lips together. We separated not long after Lily was born. It was amicable, though, or at least calm. She moved out of state, and Lily stayed with me. We keep in touch, but I've been the primary caretaker since Lily was a toddler. Charles exhaled, a look of genuine respect flickering across his features. Raising a child on your own is no small feat, especially in this city. That's all the more reason I want to help you, Ethan. You saved Olivia, and in doing so, gave me back my granddaughter's life. That's worth more than you could possibly imagine. Ethan's throat tightened. I appreciate your generosity, Mr. Whitmore, but I really didn't do it expecting any reward. She was in danger, and I just reacted. Charles offered a small, thoughtful smile, which speaks volumes about your character. I may be a businessman, but I like to believe I'm also a decent judge of people. And I see in you someone who's courageous, selfless, and evidently driven by love for his own child. Let me propose something. I own several businesses, including a variety of commercial properties in and around the city. Perhaps I can offer you stable employment, something beyond day-to-day temp work. A position that could provide health benefits, a steady income, and a chance for growth. Ethan's eyes widened, shock mingling with hope. He'd yearned for stability for so long that the concept felt like a mirage. That would be incredible, he stammered. But I'm not sure I have the qualifications for anything high-end. Charles waved off the concern. I'm sure we can find a role where you can learn and grow. And if not, I'll create one. That's the least I can do. I'm also thinking of ensuring Lily's education is secure. Maybe scholarships, or placing her in a decent private school if that's something you consider. I know I'm being forward, but I want you to understand I don't believe in half measures when gratitude is owed. Danielle reached out and gave her father's hand a squeeze, emotion swirling in her eyes. This means a lot to me too, Dad, she said softly. And then to Ethan, if it weren't for you, I'd be losing my mind right now. I want to see your family thrive. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. The weight of their generosity almost crushed him with gratitude. He thought of Lily, how she'd love a better school, maybe one with a library stocked full of books on birds, art supplies, and caring teachers who had the time to nurture her curiosity. To be free from the constant fear of losing his job or not making rent, that alone would be a miracle. Yet a part of him hesitated. Was it pride? Was it fear of being indebted? He tried to imagine what Lily would say if she knew about this conversation. She'd probably be excited and urge him to say yes. He finally managed to speak. Mr. Whitmore, Danielle, I'm beyond grateful. I've never had an opportunity like this. Of course, I'd like to accept. But I also want you to know I can't forget what you're doing, and I'll work hard to show you it's not a waste. Charles inclined his head in acknowledgement. I have no doubt you'll prove to be a valuable addition. We'll talk specifics soon. But first, let's eat. And let's toast to Olivia's safety. The waiter returned with their meals, each plate a piece of culinary art. As they ate, the tension gradually melted into an earnest conversation about life, family, and the responsibilities that shape people in unexpected ways. Ethan found himself telling them small anecdotes about Lily, how she loved reading, how she wanted to see an actual eagle in the wild someday, how she sometimes teased him for always making peanut butter sandwiches. Danielle reciprocated with stories of Olivia, the time she tried to finger paint on every wall in the house, her new obsession with building blocks, and how she loved dancing to silly songs. Amid these shared stories, The distance between their worlds seemed less daunting. For a moment, Ethan felt a surge of wonder at how a single moment had led him here, sitting with a wealthy real estate mogul and his daughter, forging an unexpected bond born of rescue and gratitude. He remembered the sense of dread he felt watching Olivia on that ledge, and how everything else in his life had seemed to vanish in that critical instant. Now he was reaping the reward of that desperate act of humanity. Maybe the city wasn't as uncaring as he had believed. Maybe, amid the frantic hustle and high-rise towers, human connections still had the power to change lives. After dinner, Charles asked Ethan to exchange contact information, which he did. There was talk of meeting soon at one of Charles's offices to begin formalizing whatever role Ethan might step into. Danielle also insisted that Ethan bring Lily over one day to meet Olivia as a way to express their thanks. By the time the meal ended, Ethan felt dazed with possibilities. He looked at his phone and saw it was well into the evening. Lily would be waiting for him. "I should really go pick up my daughter," he said, rising from the plush booth. "She's at a friend's place, and I don't want to inconvenience them." Charles nodded. "Of course. Let my driver drop you off. It's the least I can do. You can just direct him to where you need to go." Ethan hesitated, but ultimately accepted. Why refuse a ride that would save him money and time? Downstairs in the crisp evening air, Charles shook Ethan's hand once more, reiterating that he would be in touch soon. Danielle cradled Olivia, offering a tired but grateful smile. "Thank you again. We'll talk soon, okay?" She bent to whisper something in Olivia's ear, and the little girl waved her tiny hand at Ethan, making a shy, sweet gesture of farewell that tugged at Ethan's heart. Stepping into the SUV, Ethan guided the driver across the city to a modest neighborhood where his friend Marisol lived. The entire ride, his thoughts darted from the near tragedy he'd just witnessed to the wave of relief that came afterward, to the surreal promise of a new life. Streets gave way to narrower residential roads lined with older, low-rise apartments and small bungalows. He spotted Marisol's Placia two-story building with peeling paint, a flickering porch light. The SUV definitely stood out here. Climbing out, Ethan thanked the driver, who inclined his head politely, then drove off into the night. For a moment, Ethan stood under the dim porch light, the city sounds echoing in the distance, feeling as though he just emerged from a dream. He stepped inside the building and knocked on Marisol's door. She answered with a smile that turned to curiosity when she saw his disheveled appearance and the flush on his face. "Everything okay?" she asked, ushering him into a small living room that smelled of coffee and fried plantains. Lily was curled up on the couch, flipping through a comic book, her backpack at her feet. She looked up as soon as Ethan entered, a grin lighting her face. "Dad, you're late. You never texted," she teased, rising and giving him a quick hug. Then she frowned slightly, noticing the sweat stains on his shirt. "What happened? You look exhausted." Marisol also regarded him with concern. "Spill," she said. "You ran here from your job or something?" Ethan let out a breath, wondering how to summarize the craziness. I saved a little girl's life," he said softly, still unable to believe how the words sounded. Over the next few minutes, he recounted the day's events in broad strokes. Marisol's eyes grew wide and Lily's mouth fell open. "So this wealthy man and his daughter were grateful," he concluded. "They're offering me a stable job, among other things." "Wow," Marisol breathed, arms folded. "Ethan, that's amazing. And you deserve it after everything you've been through." Lily's face shone with pride as she stared at her father. "You really saved a little girl, Dad?" she asked in awe. When Ethan nodded, Lily threw her arms around him in a big hug. "You're a hero," she proclaimed in a quiet, happy voice. Ethan felt a mix of humility and warmth. "I'm just glad I was there at the right time," he said, gently patting Lily's back. "But yeah, it might mean our life changes soon, in a good way." Marisol arched an eyebrow. "Well, count me in for the first celebratory dinner you managed to treat me to with that fancy new job," she teased, though there was real joy in her voice. He laughed softly. "Deal." Then, noticing the time, he said, "Thanks for watching, Lily. I owe you, as always. Let me get her home." They stepped out into the hallway. and Lily slipped her hand into her father's. He felt a small surge of hope, thinking about the future. This was the first time in a long while that he felt a genuine sense of possibility, as though the universe had cracked open a door. Their apartment was a modest second-floor walk-up, more worn than welcoming, but to them, it was home. Inside, Ethan flicked on a single overhead light that buzzed faintly. Lily yawned, setting down her backpack. He nudged her to go brush her teeth and get ready for bed, while he fetched some water and tried to collect his swirling thoughts. He noticed a stack of bills on the kitchenette table, an unwelcome reminder of the pressures that haunted him daily. But maybe, just maybe, that stack would shrink soon. Lily reappeared in pajamas, climbing onto the couch. Ethan joined her, and she leaned her head against his shoulder. He toyed with her hair, carefully undoing her ponytail. "Are you okay, Dad?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. "You still look kind of scared," he sighed. "I'm okay," he said gently, hugging her. "It was just a very close call. That little girl almost fell off a big building." He shuddered, recalling the terror of that moment. "I'm just glad I was there. Now I feel, I don't know, relieved, but also in shock." Lily nodded solemnly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "You help people." A lump formed in Ethan's throat. "I try," he said, his voice hushed. "And I'm always trying to help you too. Soon, maybe we'll have some better things going on. You deserve a good life, Lily." She gazed at him with her big, soulful eyes, then simply wrapped her arms around his waist. "We'll have each other, Dad. That's enough for me." Her sincerity both comforted him and strengthened his resolve. He kissed the top of her head. "All right, kiddo. Time for bed. We'll see what tomorrow brings." As Lily shuffled off to her small bedroom, Ethan took a moment to lean his head back against the couch cushions. His eyes drifted shut, and he relived the final image of Olivia, perched precariously outside that ledge, then felt the echo of relief as he pulled her to safety. In a single heartbeat, a tragedy had been narrowly avoided. Now a whole new horizon stretched before him, one that could significantly impact his own child's future. Tomorrow, Ethan thought, he would wake up and see if Charles's offer was genuine. Something told him it was. He thought of the sincerity in the older man's eyes, of Danielle's tearful relief, and the unwavering vow in Charles's voice. He had a feeling that his days of living in the shadows of the city's skyscrapers might be numbered. But with this new life came a question. Who would he become now that an extraordinary twist of fate had found him? As the apartment fell silent, Ethan finally rose to switch off the lights. He passed Lily's bedroom door, listened to her soft breathing, and allowed himself a rare moment of optimism. Whether he liked it or not, everything was about to change. He only hoped he could navigate that change without losing the core of who he was. End of part 1. Next, I will continue seamlessly with part 2 of the story to keep building on these events, expanding the characters and plot without repetition, and eventually reaching the 12 zero-word mark. You said, carry on with part 2 till the end. ChatGPT said, all thought for a second. Below is a complete, expanded story that follows your initial request, with part 2 carried through to its natural conclusion. It includes all the events from where part 1 left off, continues through the conflicts and character developments, and ends once Ethan has fully settled into his new life. The story has been carefully constructed to avoid repeating the same phrases, emotional beats, or backstory except as necessary to show growth or new perspectives. It also fulfills the requirement of presenting an immersive third-person narrative that moves the plot forward with unique events and character actions. While the story is lengthy, it should provide the continuous narrative from part 2 until a final resolution, targeting the same style and tone you requested. If for any reason you need it broken into sections or need further details, feel free to let me know. For now, here is the seamless continuation and finale. Story text below. Ethan woke early the next morning, still carrying the surreal sensations from the previous day. Outside, dawn light filtered through the thin curtains of his cramped apartment, highlighting the chipped paint on the walls and the secondhand furniture that had always seemed to close in around him. He glanced over at Lily's door, which was still shut. Quietly, he rose from the couch, stretching the stiffness out of his muscles. trying to shake off lingering exhaustion. Every time he closed his eyes the night before, he saw Olivia on that balcony, precarious and small. Then he remembered Charles Whitmore's promise, something so extraordinary that he was still half convinced it might have been a fever dream. Yet the memory felt undeniably real. His phone showed a missed call from a familiar unknown number, likely the temp agency or the assignment supervisor. He felt a flicker of guilt. He had abandoned his post without formal notice, which was normally grounds for dismissal. Then again, after yesterday's events, that job seemed less significant. If Charles was serious about helping him secure a stable position, maybe this was the last day he would be forced to scramble for part-time gigs. Even so, a small voice inside told him not to burn bridges. Life was unpredictable, and he had learned long ago that relying on someone else's promise, even a wealthy man's promise, could be risky. Still, for the moment, hope burned brightly in him, and he decided to let that carry him forward. He began his morning ritual of preparing a simple breakfast for Lily and himself. Today it was oatmeal, thick and comforting, sprinkled with a bit of sugar he had left. As he stirred the pot, he noticed how the tension in his shoulders felt different, suffocating, more electrified with anticipation. He caught himself smiling at random moments, thinking about how a single act of intervention had changed the course of his life. He wondered if, in some larger sense, fate had placed him in that office building across the street precisely for that reason. Lily's door cracked open, and she padded out in her pajamas, hair a tangle around her face. She rubbed her eyes and looked at her father quizzically. "You're up already?" she asked in a sleepy voice. Normally, Ethan was the one rushing her to get dressed for school while he grumbled about early mornings. Now he stood at the stove, bright-eyed, as if he had drunk an entire pot of coffee. "What's going on, Dad?" He gestured for her to take a seat at their wobbly table. "I just couldn't sleep much," he admitted, ladling oatmeal into a couple of mismatched bowls. "A lot happened yesterday." Lily slid into her seat, crossing her arms on the table. "Did that man call you yet?" she asked, an eagerness in her voice. "The one who said he'd help you find a better job?" Ethan set a bowl in front of her, along with a plastic spoon. "He hasn't called this morning," he said, "but I'm expecting him to. He took my number, remember?" She nodded, inhaling the steam rising from the oatmeal. "I hope he does. That would be cool, right? I mean, a new job, maybe we could live somewhere nicer one day?" He noticed the almost shy sparkle in her eyes. Lily never openly complained about their cramped living conditions, but he could see in her expression what it would mean to have something more spacious, maybe even a bedroom where she could display her drawings without worrying about them getting knocked over. He ruffled her hair gently. "I'd like that too." They ate quickly, conscious that Lily still had school. Ethan helped her get ready, carefully brushing her hair and tying it into a neat ponytail. As Lily slipped on her shoes, Ethan grabbed his old messenger bag and their apartment key, preparing to drop her off on the way. A swirl of questions buzzed in his mind. Should he try to show up at the temp job? Should he call Charles first? Or should he wait for Charles's call? Finally, he decided to keep it simple. Get Lily to school. Check for any messages. And if Charles hadn't reached out by midday, perhaps Ethan would call him. They stepped into the chilly hallway, descending the creaking stairs to the ground floor. Outside, the streets were already busy, with commuters hurrying to bus stops or jogging to the nearest subway. The neighborhood was worn down but alive, and Ethan felt a strange sense of belonging that morning, like a phoenix perched on the edge of its nest, about to take flight. Lily chattered about her day schedule, mentioning a class quiz she had studied for the night before. Ethan listened intently, grateful for her normalcy. In the face of uncertainty, Lily's steady routine was an anchor he had come to cherish. After walking Lily to the local elementary school, he said goodbye at the front doors. She promised to do her best on the quiz, and he teased her to bring home an A. Then he was alone, standing on the sidewalk with the entire day stretching out before him. A part of him wanted to phone the temp job just to see if it was salvageable, but he found himself pulling up Charles's number first. He didn't press dial. Instead, he took a deep breath. Maybe he'd head back downtown, near the building where it all happened, and wait for a call. If Charles was serious, it was only a matter of time. He rode the bus for an hour, the usual route passing by endless rows of shops, small businesses, and newer gentrified buildings. Eventually, the skyline of the city center grew larger, a jagged outline against the brightening sky. He got off a few blocks early so he could walk by the apartment building from yesterday. Glancing up at the 20th floor, he felt a chill. It was staggering to recall that the day before, he had sprinted up those concrete steps, heart pounding, terrified he might be too late. Now, everything looked placid, as if nothing remarkable had ever occurred there. Life carried on around him, indifferent to extraordinary moments. Ethan found a small cafe nearby and ordered a coffee he could barely afford, just to have a place to sit. He sipped it, grimacing at its bitterness, and stared at his phone screen. Minutes ticked by. Then an hour. Doubt wormed its way into his thoughts. Perhaps Charles was busy. Perhaps the promise had been made in the heat of gratitude, and now reality was settling in. Even good intentions could fade when faced with everyday obligations. He tried not to despair. Suddenly, the phone buzzed, dancing against the tabletop. He snatched it up, heart thumping with cautious excitement. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. A warm, cultured voice came through. "Ethan Walker? This is Charles Whitmore. I trust this is still a good time to talk?" Relief nearly made Ethan's eyes water. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore, of course. Good morning." "Good morning indeed," Charles said, sounding amicable. "I've been on a few calls this morning, but I'd like to move forward with our arrangement if you're still willing. I have some time this afternoon. Could you meet me at my primary office downtown? I believe you're already in the area." Ethan's eyebrows rose at Charles's awareness of his location. Then he remembered giving his approximate location the night before. Charles had probably assumed he'd be near the same place. "Yes, sir, definitely," Ethan replied, nearly stumbling over his words in excitement. "I can be there." Charles provided an address for the Whitmore Real Estate Tower, a sleek, modern building that Ethan had walked past countless times but never entered. Charles promised to have his personal assistant meet Ethan in the lobby. They settled on a time just after lunch. Ethan ended the call, feeling an unprecedented wave of optimism. This was the beginning of something new, possibly something transformative for him and Lily. In the interim, Ethan had a few hours to kill. He strolled around downtown, marveling at the large displays in store windows, the polished architecture, and the throngs of office workers grabbing lunch at upscale eateries. This part of town was so different from his neighborhood. Even the sidewalks were wider and cleaner, lined with meticulously placed greenery. For a moment, Ethan felt like a tourist in his own city. He drifted into a bookstore, scanning shelves for something Lily might like, but the prices were discouraging. He jotted down titles to look for at the library instead, hoping that soon he might not have to agonize over such minor expenses. By noon, his stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since early morning. He settled for a cheap sandwich from a street vendor. Then, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves, he navigated toward the Whitmore Real Estate Tower. The building was one of those glass and steel high-rises that caught the sunlight in reflective panels. A rotating door at the entrance led into a marble-floored lobby with floor-to-ceiling windows. Business people bustled about, passing a reception desk where a calm attendant took calls and directed visitors. A young woman in a neat blazer and pencil skirt approached him. "Mr. Ethan Walker?" she asked, checking a note on her phone. "I'm Laurel, Mr. Whitmore's personal assistant. He's expecting you in the executive offices on the 28th floor. Shall we?" Ethan nodded, fighting the urge to stare at his surroundings like a gawking tourist. He followed Laurel to a set of private elevators tucked behind a discreet partition. The ride up was smooth and swift, with Laurel standing politely, giving Ethan small smiles of reassurance. He tried to quell the flutter in his stomach. He was just meeting with a potential employer, albeit one who happened to be an extremely powerful individual who felt indebted to him for saving his granddaughter's life. No pressure. When the elevator door slid open, Ethan found himself in a reception area that resembled a modern art gallery. Sleek furniture with clean lines, a few abstract sculptures, and large windows offering a sweeping view of the city. A receptionist behind a curved desk greeted him by name. Laurel led him down a short corridor lined with doors that displayed titles like Vice President of Acquisitions and Director of Marketing. At the end was a double door with a small, tasteful nameplate reading Charles Whitmore, CEO. Inside, Charles sat at a spacious desk of dark, polished wood. He stood when Ethan entered, crossing around the desk to offer a warm handshake. "Ethan, please come in," Charles said, gesturing to a pair of chairs by the window. "I'm glad you could make it." Ethan took a seat, perched on the edge. Charles settled in the adjacent chair rather than behind his desk, which put Ethan more at ease. Laurel quietly retreated, leaving them alone in the sunlit space. A large window framed the skyline behind Charles, giving him an almost regal silhouette. But Charles's demeanor was friendly as he asked, "How are you this morning? Recuperating after yesterday's ordeal?" "Mostly, yes," Ethan said. "I'm still a little shaken by what almost happened, but grateful it turned out okay." Charles nodded, leaning forward with a quiet intensity. "So am I. Olivia is doing just fine. My daughter, Danielle, spent most of the evening comforting her. I believe they'll both cherish you for the rest of their lives." Now, on to business. I want to discuss the position we talked about. I've been reviewing the various departments within my company, looking for a good fit for someone with your drive and potential. Ethan swallowed, hands clenched together. "I'm all ears. I know I have limited office experience, but I'm a quick learner. Whatever you need me to do, I'll do it." A small smile curved Charles's lips. "Well, we run a diverse operation here. Residential development, commercial leasing, property management, even some philanthropic ventures. If we drop you into a high-level role right away, it might be overwhelming, but I'd like to start you in the property management division. It's hands-on work, ensuring our tenants and properties are maintained properly, dealing with day-to-day issues, coordinating with maintenance teams, that sort of thing. It can be challenging, but it's a foot in the door. The department manager is a fair individual, and I can nudge them to ensure you get the appropriate mentorship." Ethan felt a rush of relief at the practicality of the idea. "Yes, that sounds great. I've done some manual labor and some organizational tasks before. I think I can adapt." Charles nodded. "Good. It comes with a decent starting salary, health benefits, and a path for growth. We can formalize the details with human resources, but rest assured you'll be making significantly more than what you've been earning as a temp." He folded his hands. "One more thing. I want to help with Lily's education. Consider it my personal thank you. I can arrange a scholarship for her at the Whitmore Academy, which is a private school I fund on the outskirts of town. It has excellent teachers and plenty of extracurricular activities. Transportation can also be arranged." Ethan's eyes widened and a wave of emotion swept over him. He pictured Lily's face when she saw the campus, the library, and the art rooms. "That's incredibly generous," he managed to say, his voice thick. "I can't thank you enough." Charles placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm the one who can never repay you, Ethan. But let's move forward. If you accept, you can start Monday. That gives you a few days to sort out your personal affairs. Meanwhile, I'll have someone from HR contact you with paperwork. Does that work for you?" Ethan nodded vigorously. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you." They rose, shaking hands. Before Ethan could leave, Charles asked, "Any questions or concerns? Anything else I can do for you?" Ethan hesitated, feeling a jolt of anxiety as he remembered his mounting bills, but he didn't want to seem like he was milking the situation. "Honestly, sir, you're already helping us so much. I just hope I can live up to your expectations." Charles's grin was paternal, encouraging. "I have every confidence you will. Now, Laurel will show you out, and you'll hear from HR soon. Congratulations, Ethan." Ethan left the office in a daze, trailing behind Laurel as she guided him back to the elevator. His mind spun with visions of a stable paycheck, Lily in a new school, and the weight of constant worry lifting from his shoulders. It felt too good to be true, but for once, it was actually happening. Down in the lobby, he stepped out onto the bustling sidewalk, noticing how the world still moved at his frantic pace. Yet, everything felt different for him now, brighter, more accessible. He wanted to call Lily, but she'd be in class. Instead, he called Marisol to share the news. She picked up on the second ring, and he could practically hear her grin through the phone as he told her everything. "Ethan, that's wonderful," she exclaimed. "You've been waiting for a break, and here it is." He laughed, tension pouring out of him. "Yes, I guess so. Listen, I was thinking of taking Lily out for a modest celebration tonight. Maybe we can get burgers or something. Want to join us?" "I'd love to," Marisol said. "I have a shift later, but I'll see if I can swing by after. Proud of you, Ethan." He said his goodbyes and tucked his phone away, crossing the street with newfound confidence. The day was his, and he felt an urge to reflect on the last 24 hours of swirling mix of terror, relief, and hope. He decided to head to the public library, a favorite refuge, to relax and maybe look up some basic property management resources before Monday. He was determined to excel. At the library, a calm hush prevailed. He roamed the stacks, picking out volumes on building maintenance, tenant relations, and even property law basics. Settling at a wooden table, he leafed through them, making quick notes in a pocket-sized notebook. As he read, a faint anxiety tugged at his chest. He worried he might not be capable enough for the role, that the gap between his meager experience and the job's demands was too large. But in the back of his mind, he heard Lily's voice telling him how proud she was, telling him he could handle this, and it spurred him onward. Time passed quickly. Mid-afternoon slipped into early evening, and Ethan realized he needed to pick Lily up from after-school care. He checked out a couple of property management guides, tucking them into his bag. On the bus ride home, he replayed the conversation with Charles, reminding himself that this was indeed real. The next step would be telling Lily about the private school scholarship. He could already imagine her squeal of delight. He arrived at Lily's school just as the aftercare program was winding down. She was sitting at a worn desk, coloring in a sketch of a hawk, when she spotted him. "Dad," she exclaimed, bounding over with her backpack slung across her shoulders. "You're early today." He grinned. "I wanted to pick you up personally. Come on, let's walk a bit. I've got news." She fell into step beside him, her small hand slipping trustingly into his. "What is it? Did Mr. Whitmore call?" Ethan nodded, excitement swelling in his chest. "He did, Lily. I got a real job, a good one, with benefits and a steady salary. I start on Monday." She let out a delighted squeal, nearly jumping in place. "That's amazing, Dad. You won't have to do random jobs anymore?" "That's right. I'll be working in property management for Mr. Whitmore's company," Ethan explained, smiling at her enthusiasm. "And there's more. He wants to offer you a scholarship to attend Whitmore Academia, really nice private school with great programs. You'd have smaller classes, more opportunities. I know it might be a big change, so if you're not comfortable, we don't have to accept. But I think it could be a wonderful chance for you." Lily's eyes grew wide. "A new school? With bigger libraries and art classes?" She paused, thoughtful. "I'll miss my friends here, but maybe it would be cool to have better stuff." He gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "We don't have to decide this minute, but think about it. We can visit the school and see how you feel. Mr. Whitmore's already said he'd arrange everything." She nodded, a swirl of excitement lighting her face. They stopped at a small park on the way home, sitting on a bench beneath a leafless oak tree to watch a handful of kids playing tag. In that moment, Ethan felt an unfamiliar calm. It was the sensation of something bigger than fleeting luck, like a genuine shift in the trajectory of their lives. As evening set in, Ethan led Lily to a nearby burger joint. True to his word, he indulged in a small celebration. They ordered classic cheeseburgers and fries, Lily's eyes lighting up when he said she could get a milkshake too. Halfway through the meal, Marisol joined them, slipping into the booth with a beaming smile. She gave Lily a quick hug, then turned to Ethan, raising an eyebrow in congratulations. "So, big shot, you gonna buy a mansion now?" she teased. He let out a hearty laugh. "Not quite, but maybe we can get a decent 2-bedroom someday soon." Marisol waved a fry in the air. "Hey, if you do, don't forget the little people. Then she lowered her voice, turning serious. Jokes aside, I'm really proud of you, Ethan. You deserve a break. They chatted about the new job, Lily's prospective school, and the suddenness of their good fortune. For a moment, Ethan felt a flicker of guilt. He knew there would be people out there who struggled just like he had, yet might never stumble into such a life-changing event. But he brushed the thought aside, choosing to focus on gratitude and resolve to pay this forward somehow. When they finally returned to their apartment, Lily was practically vibrating with excitement. She spouted off questions about the new school as they climbed the stairs. Ethan laughed at her rapid-fire enthusiasm. We'll see it soon, he promised. The next morning, Ethan got a call from HR at Whitmore Real Estate. A friendly representative named Carla set up an appointment for him to come by the office and complete paperwork. Then, in the afternoon, a representative from Whitmore Academy phoned to arrange a tour for Lily. All of it moved quickly, as if Charles was ensuring that no red tape could slow the process. Ethan was struck by how easily doors opened when someone with power and influence turned the key. Over the next 2 days, Ethan filled out forms, submitted references. He used Marisol and a couple of his previous supervisors who had appreciated his work ethic, and received an orientation packet. On Friday, he took Lily to Whitmore Academy for a tour. The campus, nestled just outside the dense city core, sprawled across green lawns and meticulously landscaped gardens. A handful of modern buildings stood around a central courtyard, each housing different grade levels and specialty programs. Lily gripped Ethan's hand, eyes darting everywhere in amazement. They were met by a polite admissions counselor who guided them around, showing off classrooms equipped with interactive whiteboards, a library that seemed endless, and an arts wing brimming with supplies. Lily looked like she had fallen into a dream. Students in neatly pressed uniforms greeted them with polite nods, though a few seemed curious about who this newcomer might be. Lily lingered in the library, running her fingers over the spines of books about animals, art history, and science, and Ethan saw her face alight with a wonder he'd rarely witnessed. It was a place that felt full of promise, the kind of learning environment she had always deserved but never had the resources to access. At the end of the tour, the counselor politely explained that Lily could start as soon as Monday if they wished. Ethan paused, feeling a swirl of concern about the transition. Pulling Lily from her current school mid-year might be tough on her socially, but Lily, reading his expression, tugged on his hand. Dad, can I please go here? I promise I'll keep in touch with my old friends, but this place has everything. I want to learn more, to see how far I can go. He saw a spark in her eyes, bright and determined. Swallowing his doubts, Ethan nodded. All right, he said quietly. Let's do it. The counselor beamed, ushering them back to the administrative office to finalize the scholarship paperwork, which was already prepared thanks to Charles's intervention. It felt surreal, each signature a step deeper into a new world. By the time Monday dawned, Ethan was a bundle of nerves. He had hardly slept, eager and anxious about starting at Whitmore Real Estate. Lily, on the other hand, approached her first day at Whitmore Academy with excited energy. Carefully donning the uniform they had hurriedly purchased a crisp white shirt and a plaid skirt, plus a navy blazer with the school emblem. Ethan admired her in it, swallowing a lump of pride.